Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sports Degenerates Show. I'm your host, Frank Wible. We're on to episode 4. Had some big news. Episode 3. Finally got my first comment. I got called a casual fan. I've officially made it as a YouTuber. I'm so proud. Today we got 3 topics to talk about. One, I'm going to go over the NHL Playoffs. We got the second round. I got 3 teams wrong, but all my final 4 teams are still in it. Number 2 kind of changed a little bit on me today. I was originally going to talk about Earl Thomas being sent home from the Baltimore Ravens, but instead, we're going to talk about Earl Thomas getting released today from the Baltimore Ravens. And then finally, we're going to go keep it on the NFL trend. I'm going to go through all 32 NFL teams rather quickly, and I'm going to rank every quarterback from 32 to 1. Number 1's Pat Mahomes. I don't think I'm surprising anybody there. From 32 to 1, and list them all and why I think they stay there. So let's get started first. We got the second round of the NHL playoffs. We've got the Golden Knights versus the Canucks, the Stars versus the Avs, and then in the Eastern Conference we have the Flyers versus the Islanders, the Lightning versus the Bruins. I'll be the first person to admit who did I have? Calgary over Dallas, and I had St. Louis over Vancouver, as well as Carolina over Boston. Got all 3 wrong, but it's good because I had all 3 losing this round anyway. But we'll break it down. Vegas and Calgary, or Vegas and Vancouver. It's an interesting one. Vancouver moves on from St. Louis. Jordan Binnington just was terrible this postseason. St. Louis is able to keep it going. Now you have Vegas and Vancouver. I still believe the same. I think Vegas goes on and wins. Vancouver really is still a young team. It helps them now. They get more playoff experience. They're a team that will no longer be flying under the radar next year. I can guarantee that. They might be contenders in the Pacific the Pacific Division in the Western Conference this year, but still think I still have Vancouver. I think I have Vegas. I think Vancouver's going to do. They're going to do well though against Vegas. I think they're fast. They're young. And it's that old saying, you don't know what you don't know. They don't realize that they're really not supposed to be there, but I think they're gonna compete. But I have Vegas. About 6 games, I think Vegas will take it. Second one will be Colorado and Dallas. Dallas won last night. Vancouver, Philip Grubauer goes down, or Colorado, Philip Grubauer goes down with an injury. They're back onto their backup goalie now. I still think Colorado is going to win this game, but Dallas showed me a lot against Calgary. They showed a lot of poise. They attacked Calgary's goaltending for really struggling, especially in the 7 straight goals game. So I'm going to hold true to Colorado because I have Colorado going on here. But Dallas has shown me a few things in their series against Calgary. I do think, though, it would have changed if Calgary was able to hold the 1-goal lead they had with under a minute left in Game 4 and took a 3-1 lead in that series. I don't think Dallas would be here. Now you have Colorado. Does Colorado step on Dallas's throat in this series? If they have the opportunity, I think they do. You have the Flyers and the Islanders. Not going to lie, my Flyers scared me a little bit. Montreal's defense, as well as Carey Price, was standing on their head. They were giving the Flyers fits. Their top line couldn't get it going. Thankfully, Carter Hart stood on his head, and Montreal's offense really wasn't anything to be afraid of. But they have the Islanders now, and I did have the Islanders beating the Capitals. And here's the question: are the Islanders for real, or were the Capitals bad? And that's what it comes down to. Are the Islanders for real, or were the Capitals finally drifting off? Are they done? Is their shot at a dynasty over? They never had a dynasty. Their 1 cup win, is it over? Is that window closed? I don't know. It's funny. You go back to when the Flyers were dominating in the round robin, and I would have thought they would have just smoked the Islanders because the Islanders were struggling with the Florida Panthers. Well, now all of a sudden it's completely role reversed. Now, is it possible, watching that Flyer series, there wasn't a whole lot of angst or pressure in that series for the Flyers? It was odd. It kind of just seemed like 2 teams having exhibition games, or at least the Flyers viewed it as an exhibition game. The Canadians did not, but talent alone helped them carry on. I think if the Flyers get it back on track, which I believe they will, I think they'll snap into reality here against the Islanders, and they'll still win this series. But I think the Islanders are a pretty dangerous team going forward. But I do still have the Flyers winning. And the Lightning versus Boston. I did not have Boston winning this. They looked horrible in the round robin. Anybody that's ever from Boston will probably agree with you that they might have hit the panic button a little bit after the round robin game. I'm still going to go with the Lightning just for their offense alone. It's going to be a fun series. It really is. I think the Lightning have hit a different stride. It would have been interesting if this series, say, Tampa Bay struggled against Columbus, but they really didn't. Boston really didn't struggle against Carolina either. I think Carolina after game 2 had a little bit of a high, but once Boston kind of came out and hit them in the mouth, Carolina kind of snapped back to reality. I would go with Tampa Bay here just for their goal scoring ability and their goaltending too. Remember that Tuukka Rask is now out of the bubble. It's Yaroslav Halak, who has a ton of experience in the playoffs, but he is a backup for a reason against Vasilevsky from Tampa Bay. So I still have Vegas versus Colorado, the Flyers versus the Lightning, and I'm still holding out on the Flyers versus the Avs in the finals. So we hope that's how that's gonna play out. Switching tracks to the NFL, some big news today. Consummate Pro Bowler safety Earl Thomas getting released from the Baltimore Ravens. Kind of came out of nowhere too. Last week, Earl was asked to leave Ravens practice. He got in an argument with Chuck Clark, the other safety for the Baltimore Ravens, after a blown coverage play in practice. And it's an interesting topic because it was one play that you saw. Earl Thomas posted on his Instagram, called it out, said he was having a great camp. It was just an argument, but he's kind of bummed to see that it happened before he was released. But it's a very interesting concept here because Chuck Clark is a 5th-round pick. Earl Thomas is a possible Hall of Famer. How often do you see a 5th-round pick yell at a possible Hall of Famer in practice that he's doing something wrong? And how often would it be in practice that it was only one time he missed his spot? That's when I saw that one play, I said, was there 6 plays before this where Earl was just missing everything? It also came out that players have had an issue with Earl Thomas. He's been late to meetings. He's been lazy. A lot of players apparently have been looking at him saying, we don't want him here anymore. Kind of making their opinions known. There's reports coming out in Baltimore, or were coming out in Baltimore, that players had come out and said to management that they just don't want Earl Thomas around anymore. Baltimore had a clause in his contract, in Earl Thomas's contract, that if he had conduct detrimental to the team, they could suspend him or they could release him without any cap penalty. So once they sent him home and it had become clear that they had that option to just release him without a cap penalty, the writing was on the walls for Baltimore. Now, Earl Thomas left graciously. He thanked management, thanked coaches in his post after he was released, said he was sorry to see it happen like that. But really, just what a wild turnout that all of a sudden, after no time at all. I mean, this wasn't something that it had been building. I mean, I know Earl had his issues in the offseason with his wife and catching him with his brother with a bunch of hookers, whatever. But that's not on the field. You know, it is what it is. That was early in the offseason, and that's not on the field. So, hey. So, it is interesting. The Ravens do have young safeties that are moving up that apparently a lot of players like, and they're going to try to move on with it and keep pushing and going forward and growing, and they're a championship contending team, so I don't think they're going to hang back and worry about this. I will say it's going to be very interesting to see where Earl Thomas goes now. Now, Earl Thomas is a free agent again. He was just released. He's not going to get the big contract that the Ravens offered him after he was out of Seattle. I think the fastest way to say where he's going to go is he's going to go to the Dallas Cowboys. He had obviously been known telling Jason Garrett to come get me when he was in Seattle, hoping that he would go to the Cowboys. The Cowboys have been in talks with getting big safeties. Jamal Adams, who ironically is now in Seattle. So now Earl Thomas is in the market. Does he go there? The other, I think, a dark horse candidate that I don't think enough people are talking about is Houston. And the reason why I say that is because Deshaun Watson came out. He looks up to, by the way, Earl Thomas is from Texas. I know Dallas is in Texas, so is Houston. Deshaun Watson came out after Earl Thomas had been released, said he was really sad to hear about that. He's always relied on Earl Thomas for guidance and help and thinks the world of him. And it'd be interesting to see because Deshaun Watson, Bill O'Brien just cut Deshaun Watson's number one target, or traded his number one target, but they got like nothing for him, so it might as well have been cut. It'd be interesting because Deshaun Watson's on a contract year this year. Do they go in and try to make him a little bit happier? Bring in guys that Deshaun Watson really likes and help him moving forward, maybe not on the field, but off the field. So it is an interesting one. We don't have a ton of camp drama right now because we don't have any preseason games. So there's not a ton of camp drama going forward that was exciting, and that one just came out of nowhere. So thanks, Baltimore. Good looks. And then it's going to be finally, but it's going to take up majority of this video, is going through the 32 NFL starters. There are certain lines here. This isn't a solid list. I would argue with people around my top 6. Yeah, about top 6, I would say. I'd have an argument for everybody of why they're there. If you see somebody at 22 that you think should be at 17, I could probably move them to 17. I think a lot of guys in the middle are really just in the middle. And this is a projection. This is who I think are not only the top quarterbacks now, but going to be this year as well. So there's going to be some rookies that aren't just immediately at 32 and 31 because, they're rookies. No, I do believe that there's going to be, although I think there's only one guaranteed rookie starter this year. Yeah, Joe Burrow is the only guaranteed rookie starter so far. So Joe Burrow's not 32. So moving forward, I think these guys will have possibly better years, possibly not. That's why they got left back. So without further ado, 32, I don't think this is a surprise for anybody. They haven't even announced their starter yet. It's going to be Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles for the Bears. I'm an Eagles fan, so I always love for what Nick Foles did, but don't let the national media, steer you wrong. It's a very vocal minority that think Foles is better than Wentz because he's not. Mitch Trubisky, he's bad. He's really bad. It's going to be interesting. Matt Nagy, I don't think really loves Trubisky. He wasn't there when he was drafted, and I don't think Matt Nagy really likes the fact that his job is tied to Mitch Trubisky, whom he did not draft, but Ryan Pace did. I'm sure Matt Nagy would love life if the Bears had actually drafted Watson and Mahomes when they had the chance and not Trubisky. So I think that's where Foles came in. Nagy might be trying to save his job with starting Foles for a year or two, performing decently. I think if he goes about 8-8, 9-7, he'll still keep his job, and then moving forward and finding a quarterback for the future. 31 is either Ryan Fitzpatrick or Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. This one might actually get a little bit heat because it's Fitzmagic. It's Fitzmagic. He's 37. He's Ryan Fitzpatrick. For instance, Ryan Fitzpatrick last year, 62% completion percentage, 3,529 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. He had a really good year. A year a lot better than anybody was expecting. But here's the problem with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and we've seen this in the past, is he'll have a really good year, and then he'll just lay an egg. I said this in a previous video. Ask the New York Jets. He had a career year for the Jets. They brought him back. There was a lot of conversation if he was going to come back, if he wasn't going to come back. They stuck with him, and then he was terrible. And then the Jets drafted Sam Darnold. So I do also believe that eventually that Fitzpatrick's not going to keep that job for long. While Fitzpatrick he's a commodity, he's funny, he's a meme. He's not going to win football games. He's not the future of your franchise. Dolphins fans, while I'm sure they're happy to have him, they want Tua. They want Tua to play. And I just don't know if when Tua comes in, if he's going to be ready to lead that team. So it'll be interesting. 30. Gardner Minshew, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the George Wonder. Look, Gardner Minshew, I loved Gardner Minshew before the city of Jacksonville loved Gardner Minshew, simply because his lone starting year at Washington State, I believe they went 11-2 against the spread that year. He saved me a lot of good days became great days for betting on Washington State at 10 o'clock at night, and a lot of really bad days became days that pushed because of a lot of good days of Gardner Minshew. So he had a good year last year. 60.6 completion percentage, 3,271 yards, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and then a 91.2 rating. He really outperformed everybody. In my opinion, I think if you're going to give a quarterback rookie of the year like you did Kyler Murray, why in the world was it not Gardner Minshew? Now, granted, it's AFC, NFC, but still, why in the world was it not Gardner Minshew? So that one, he performed better. He wasn't the starter all year either, which is even crazier. But I do think for Jacksonville, I think some of the fans like Gardner Minshew for what he is. However, if he performs well again, Jacksonville's going to be in a bad issue. Even if Jacksonville's horrible this year, they're tanking for Trevor this year, for Trevor Lawrence. Does Jacksonville? Quite frankly, I think if he has a good season and Jacksonville decides to still suck, they don't decide, they just do. If he has a good year and Jacksonville still is the number 1 overall pick in the draft, there is 0% chance that Trevor Lawrence is not going to Jacksonville. You're not picking Gardner Minshew over Trevor Lawrence. It's just not happening, ever. However, for Jacksonville, it would be great because they could trade Gardner Minshew like that. If Gardner Minshew has another year, even like he had last year, 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, I'd like to see the completion percentage go up a little bit. But almost 61% completion percentage and a 91.2 rating for a rookie that was drafted in the 5th round, I think, is a steal. If they get it again, it's very likely they're going to try to trade him, and they're going to get a lot more they're going to get a hell of a return on their investment, because even if he puts numbers up like that again, next year's quarterback class isn't huge, but there's a lot more teams that might need a quarterback. So Jacksonville could end up with possibly a 2nd or 3rd round pick for Gardner Minshew. But if they do have the first pick in the draft, there's 0% chance that Gardner Minshew is staying the starter over Trevor Lawrence. Number 29 is Dwayne Haskins of the formerly Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team. Seriously, Dan Snyder, you couldn't even get that right. Haskins last year, 58.6% completion percentage, 1,365 yards, 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a 76.1 rating. Haskins is interesting to me, and the reason I have him so low is I didn't believe in Dwayne Haskins coming out of college. I personally don't believe in any Ohio State quarterback coming out of college, but there was something about Dwayne Haskins. I thought he had a better head on his shoulders than Jamarcus Russell. Let me get that clear right away, but I think he reminds me of Jamarcus Russell, where he's not super athletic. He's a big, strong guy with a strong arm, but makes a lot of questionable decisions. Defenses can confuse him a lot. So it'll be interesting. I do think if he figured it all out, he could look like Ben Roethlisberger. He has that type of build and that type of ability. But I don't see it. I don't think he will. To give credit to Dwayne Haskins, he only started half the year last year. His coach got fired midway through the season last year. And also there was reports that his coach didn't even want him when he got drafted. It was the ownership that wanted him. And then in this offseason, it was then talked that maybe Ron Rivera doesn't believe in Dwayne Haskins. Now, the Redskins, or formerly the Redskins, have quite a few quarterbacks. You have Alex Smith, who's coming back on basically one leg. You have Dwayne Haskins, you have Kyle Allen, and I think they have one other quarterback that I can't think of. But they have at least 3 guys that you could see possibly. Alex Smith is a consummate pro. Dwayne Haskins is supposed to be the quarterback of the future, and Kyle Allen was under now current head coach for the Washington football team, Ron Rivera. He started for him. He benched Cam. Ron Rivera benched Cam for Kyle Allen. I think Haskins is going to play just because they need to know what they have from him, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on Dwayne Haskins this year, because does Dwayne Haskins make it? I don't know. If he doesn't perform well this year, it's highly likely that they cut ties with him like that. 2 years into his career, he might be going somewhere else. Next up, Tyrod Taylor. Hold on, what am I at? 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, Tyrod Taylor. I have Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert kind of cut off on this one, and this is why. Neither one, I believe, is going to turn the ball over, and that's huge for where I'm ranking these quarterbacks. I don't think either one of them is going to win them many games, but I think that's okay. If you go back and look at the Chargers last year with Phillip Rivers, he was just losing games for him late in the game. If Jameis Winston wasn't making it an art in Tampa Bay, you could look over in LA with the Chargers and go, oh, wow, Jameis Winston, or Phillip Rivers is doing the same thing Jameis Winston did. He was throwing a ton of interceptions. They were always late in games. It was terrible times for turnovers. Now they won't have that issue. Tyrod Taylor's not going to wow with anybody and run away with any game or anything like that, but I think he has the weapons, he has the defense, as well as Justin Herbert. He has the weapons, he has the defense to just game manage for them. And I think if Justin Herbert were to come in for Tyrod Taylor, I think it's the same thing. Justin Herbert's never been a guy that's, for Oregon that just took over games, except for the Rose Bowl, his last game at Oregon. He never just took over a game and dominated. But he relied on the talent around him, which isn't a bad thing, to be quite honest with you, especially as a rookie. And if he comes in, I think he's going to do the same thing. I don't believe he's going to throw a ton of interceptions. It's never been something he's done. I don't think it'll just add to it, out of nowhere. So I would go, that's where I have the Chargers at is 28th. That's why I have them above certain teams. Number 27 is Derek Carr and the Raiders. Derek Carr is one of those guys that statistically is so much better than he is actually on the field. Derek Carr's stats, when I was doing this list, looking at his stats, I was stunned at the numbers he put up last year. 70.4% completion percentage, 4,054 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and had a quarterback rating of 100.8. I'm sorry, what? Are you serious? Derek Carr had those numbers? But then if you actually go back and watch him play and you go, wow, you suck, dude. Derek Carr Derek Carr at his worst should be a game manager, but he is the streakiest quarterback I've ever seen. He'll have 2 quarters where he looks like he could win everything for you and then just die. The perfect example is the last game in Oakland for the Raiders, which is they played Jacksonville. He got outplayed by Gardner Minshew. He started the game on fire, and then through the second half of the season, did nothing. They couldn't score. They couldn't do anything on offense. And like I said, I don't believe that John Gruden, I said it in my rankings video, in my standings video last week, I don't believe Gruden believes in him. I don't believe Mayock believes in him. That's why Marcus Mariota's there, and they're going to try to make Marcus Mariota the starting quarterback sooner rather than later. It will be interesting to see with Derek Carr because he doesn't have Oakland fans hounding that they don't like him. It's Las Vegas fans. How do they feel about Derek Carr? Nobody knows. So we'll see. Knock on wood if you're with me, John Gruden. Number 26 is Teddy Bridgewater with the Panthers. And this is such an awesome story for Teddy Bridgewater, almost losing his entire career to a freak non-contact knee injury, to coming back, playing last year with the Saints, doing well, doing what I think he did in Minnesota beforehand, though, but turning it into a starting job. Teddy Bridgewater last year in his 5 games starting was 67.9% completion percentage, 1,384 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 99.1 rating. Teddy Bridgewater is the epitome of a game manager. He was in Minnesota as well. I mean, he never really exploded in Minnesota. That was never going to be his deal. That's why they were kind of quick to move on from him after the injury. Anyway, I think he's good for Carolina, though. Carolina just needs a quarterback out there right now. That Matt Rule is a defensive first head coach. He's never had a superstar quarterback when in college, in when he was at Temple, when he was at Baylor. He's never had a star quarterback. So it will be interesting to see if with Teddy Bridgewater, if he continues that trend where Matt Rule is just going to build that defense up like they did in the draft this year and just tries to have him manage the game. Do well, don't turn the ball over, give the ball to Christian McCaffrey and win some games like that. And you can. I mean, there's something to be said about guys that just don't turn the ball over. They're not flashy, they're not on SportsCenter, but they don't turn the ball over. You're not going to lose many games if a guy doesn't turn the ball over. You win the turnover battle, you win the game. Now, you need Carolina's defense to step up, because if their defense is last in the NFL in points allowed like they were this past year, they're not going to do well with Teddy Bridgewater. But if they step up a little bit and slow some teams down, it will be interesting. The only issue I do have with Teddy Bridgewater is they are in a division with 3 super powerful offenses. The Saints, the Bucks, and the Falcons all have insanely powerful offenses, and I don't know if your defense is holding them to 20 points a game. So Teddy Bridgewater is going to be interesting to see when it comes down to that. Number 25 is Joe Burrow and the Bengals. This one is, I got nothing to base it off of other than what I saw in college, other than what I saw from Joe Burrow in his pressers, in his media, in how he handled his time at LSU. I do think he's going to be really well. I think Joe Burrow is, in my opinion, a bust-proof quarterback. I also pointed out the irony that he just was quarterback in a terrible quarterback offense, that if Joe Brady doesn't go to LSU and turn that offense around, Joe Burrow ends up as a steal. And I mean, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The way I saw it was Joe Burrow would get drafted in the 5th round by the New England Patriots and be a superstar in New England after Brady, and that's how that would have worked. But thankfully he didn't. He went to Cincinnati. He just excelled. Joe Burrow, there wasn't anything on film that you're like, well, that just won't work in the NFL. He's got a big arm. He's accurate. He breaks down defenses. He's not a super athlete, but he's athletic enough to get out of the way. And he's also calm. He's not going to get rattled. I don't think he's expecting to go to the Super Bowl his first year. He understands he has work to do. The Bengals have work to do. I think the biggest thing that's going to be with him is Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, who was a quarterback coach under Sean McVay, over Jared Goff. Will that work out well for Joe Burrow? Will having a quarterback coach work out well for him? And is Zach Taylor enough of a pedigree to boost Joe Burrow? Oh, number 24, speaking of Jared Goff. Wow, the Rams regret paying this man. I don't care what anybody says. If you go back and look, I believe it was the top 5 picks in the 2016 class. The first one is the worst one. It's Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Joey Bosa, Zeke Elliott, Jalen Ramsey. Ooh. Now 2 of them are on the Rams, but Jared Goff started his career 0-7. A lot of people were questioning, maybe he's a bust. Is he a bust? I don't know. He could be a bust. Then Sean McVay came in with this high-powered offense, and they lit the world on fire, and they looked great, and it was awesome. However, there was always that thought process that Jared Goff performs in an offense that helps him perform. He can't perform without it. I mean, he's not in the days where it's hard to be a true pocket passer. Jared Goff is not an athlete, but he does not have the overpowering arm or the superb accuracy of guys like Peyton Manning in his young days, or like Tom Brady, or like Drew Brees, where they could succeed in not having to move around a lot. Jared Goff got paid a ton of money after the Super Bowl year. They scored 3 points in that Super Bowl. Last year, even statistically, wasn't terrible, but 62.9% completion percentage, 4,638 yards, 22 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, and an 86.5 QBR. 22 touchdowns and 16 interceptions is not what you want. He regressed massively after last year, or after those 2 years. He had his first year under Sean McVay. They did really well. It was like, okay, no, Jared Goff worked out. It works for them. Then the Super Bowl year, but he weirdly regressed in the Super Bowl year, and he wasn't shocking anybody anymore. And teams were slowly starting to figure it out. And then New England figured it out in the playoffs, or in the Super Bowl, of how to stop that offense. And then last year, still with a menagerie of weapons, he still had Brandon Cooks, he still had Robert Woods, he had Cooper Kupp came back. He struggled. He really struggled. And now you have an issue where his contract is huge on the Rams. And I don't know if Jared Goff, I think after this year they're going to have to restructure his contract, or they're in trouble. And as I said in my standings, one of my hot takes is Sean McVay won't be there after this year. I think they're going to struggle again this year because they sold everything to succeed, to compete for 2 years. Sean McVay is going to get another job offer, and I think he's going to leave because he realizes that he's not winning in Los Angeles. So, but we'll see. 23, speaking of the Patriots, here comes Cam Newton. Cam Newton, 2 years ago, 67.9% completion percentage, 3,395 yards, 24 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 94.2 rating. Is he healthy? I don't care what else is with Cam Newton. It doesn't matter. Is he healthy? And the problem is Cam Newton is not a pure pocket passer, and it's too late in his career to be one. However, he can throw from the pocket. His threat of being an athlete is what really made him the league MVP. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that's what happened. Well, now Cam's had foot issues. He's had throwing shoulder issues. That's a problem. So he says, and the Patriots say, that his foot and his shoulder are fine. I know they haven't announced him as a starter yet, but Cam Newton is starting over Jarrett Stidham. I don't want to hear that. If Cam plays this year and doesn't get injured, he will, without a doubt, be better than the 23rd best quarterback on this league on this chart. I just don't know if he is better than the 23rd ranked quarter or if he stays healthy, because with his history of injuries and an offense that doesn't have a ton of weapons, they're going to try to run him, and I don't know if his body's going to hold up for it after years of being beaten up. Number 22 is Daniel Jones, quarterback of the New York Giants. Daniel Jones' biggest issue last year was fumbles. I mean, if you really look at it, because other than that, you'd be surprised to see Daniel Jones' numbers. 61.9% completion percentage, 3,027 yards, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and an 87.7 rating. Now, the Giants weren't great. Also, remember, he did a lot of that without Saquon Barkley in the lineup or playing at his best, which might inflate his numbers because they were throwing more, but Daniel Jones played better than expected. He also has to stop fumbling the ball, and he looks like Eli Manning Jr. when he gets faced with a blitz. He just freezes. He's a sneaky athlete, truly is a sneaky athlete. He can move a little bit, not a lot. He's another one, though. It's going to be interesting because he had a coach who's really good with quarterbacks in Pat Shermer. How does he perform under Joe Judge? Joe Judge he's a special teams coach. And I think the worst head coaching hire that was made in the offseason. I just don't know. I think he played better than expectations, especially with the backlash that the Giants got from drafting him 6th. But I think he's decent. I think he's okay, especially for a rookie. Those are great numbers to have for a rookie. They're even better than Kyler Murray's numbers, which is crazy. Well, not super better, but I'd take them over Kyler Murray's numbers. But, again, Kyler Murray, rookie of the year. Whatever. Number 21 is another rookie, and this was a small sample size, or was it now second-year start, Drew Lock for the Broncos. 64.1% completion percentage, 1,020 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and an 89.7 rating. The Broncos' offense was bad last year. They just looked destitute at the beginning of the year. Vic Fangio looked like he might not be the best coaching hire after Vance Joseph. A lot of people were questioning it. You went defense for your head coaches. And then entered Drew Lock. John Elway finally figured out what the hell to do with a quarterback and drafted the right one. Drew Lock took over. He came in and proved why before his last year at Mizzou, he was being talked about as one of the top quarterbacks in the draft and then fell on draft charts, but the Broncos still took him, I believe, early in the second round. And it made sense. He performed well. He looked super calm under pressure. And he looks like the Broncos found a quarterback of the future. Now, that was in a very short sample size. That can always come back. This year, however, he does have better weapons. He has KJ Hamler, who I think is dealing with a minor injury, and Jerry Jeudy. So he's got 2 new wide receivers. He's got 2 new toys to play with that should help him out. But it will be interesting to see Drew Lock with a full season under his belt. But from what I saw from him last year, he warranted being 21. Number 20, the Rookie of the Year, Kyler Murray. I don't think he should have been Rookie of the Year. Kyler Murray last year had 64.4% completion percentage, 3,722 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and an 87.4 rating. He should not have been Rookie of the Year last year. I mean, he came out of nowhere to win Rookie of the Year. Nobody was talking about him winning that award. It was a lot of people, Josh Jacobs, A.J. Brown, even guys like Daniel Jones were getting love. But for some reason, Kyler Murray, because he was the number 1 pick in the draft, got it. And I don't understand why. He plays in an offense that's designed to help quarterbacks get insane stats. I don't know. I don't see it. However, what will be interesting now is he has a true number 1 receiver. Larry Fitzgerald is no longer a true number 1 receiver anymore. He's just a good slot guy. With DeAndre Hopkins out there, it'll be interesting to see Kyler Murray. The only issue I have with him is, 1, teams had a year to prepare for Cliff Kingsbury's offense, and 2, the Cardinals still didn't get him an O-line. That's not good. I know Kyler Murray can run, but he's also small. He's not a big guy. You don't want him getting beaten up a lot, and they led the NFL in sacks taken last year. So it's not a great look for the Cardinals. But regardless, Kyler Murray at 20. Number 19, slinging Sammy Darnold to the New York Jets. Here's another one that I think a lot of pressure is on him this year. And last year he had 61.9% completion percentage, 3,024 yards, 19 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, an 84.3 rating. He had that horrible game against the Patriots, but played decently last year. I think Sam Darnold's in an interesting position because this is now he's going into his 3rd year. He slightly progressed in from his first to his 2nd year. The issue I look at with the Jets is I don't think he's like on the hot seat for the starter. I don't think if he just performs average again this year that they're going to move on from him. I think there's a lot of questions of, is Adam Gase the guy to get the best out of Sam Darnold, which is interesting. In my standings video, actually, the Jets doing well. I think they're going to end about 8-8, 9-7 this year, and performing a little bit better than expected. And I think Sam Darnold's going to take a step forward. The only issue with Sam Darnold is he loses Robbie Anderson, hoping Le'Veon Bell gets back to his old ways. He does have Denzel Mims. You're hoping he develops. So it'll be interesting. But number 19 will be Sam Darnold. Number 18, Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers last year, 66% completion percentage, 4,615 yards, 23 touchdowns, 20 interceptions, 88.5 rating. Those 20 picks are 2nd in the league, only behind Jameis Winston's 30. Where to go with Phillip Rivers? Phillip Rivers had a ton of turnovers last year and a ton of interceptions late in games that cost the Chargers games. However, the Chargers O-line is nowhere near as good as the Colts offensive line. And I think with Rivers, who's always been a guy that's never been super great at protecting the ball, he's always been a guy that averages around 12 to 15 interceptions, but throws 26, 27 touchdowns a year. It'll be interesting. His arm's kind of dying down a little bit, but I'd like to see him with that offensive line. They now have Michael Pittman Jr. They have T.Y. Hilton. Hopefully he stays healthy. They have Marlon Mack. He's got weapons, but he's got time. He has protection because obviously Phillip Rivers can't move in the pocket. But if he has time to make smart decisions, Rivers can break down a defense. There's no question about that. The guy's a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about it. That's why I have him up at 18. However, it is only a 1-year deal. I think this is it for Rivers after this year. I am interested to see how, if he progresses with that offensive line or kind of goes back to where he was, where he cuts down some of those interception numbers. Number 17 is Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger is an interesting one because it's a quarterback with an elbow injury. It's almost like a pitcher with an elbow injury. And Ben Roethlisberger is pretty much a pitcher coming off of a Cy Young award-winning year. 2 years ago, Ben Roethlisberger, 67% completion percentage, 5,129 yards, 34 touchdowns, 16 picks, and a 96.5 QBR. 1, the Steelers missed him desperately last year. They really did. 2, I think he's going to do well, but I also said this in my standings video. I'm very nervous to see, and I don't want it to see, and I have no ties to Pittsburgh, but I don't want to see Ben Roethlisberger in Game 1 or Game 2 go back to throw and just instantly grab the elbow because it fired off again. From what we've seen, from what he's posted, which you can always edit anything to make it look good, he's been training hard. So hopefully for Steelers fans, it works out. I think a left-handed Ben Roethlisberger is better than Duck Hodges or Mason Rudolph, and I can honestly believe that Ben Roethlisberger is throwing more touchdown passes and yards left-handed than Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph. So we shall see. Number 16, Matt Stafford. Here's another one that would have been a lot higher on this list. if he hadn't broken his back last year, and that's a problem. Stafford last year, 64.3% completion percentage, 2,499 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a 106.1 rating. Matt Stafford does not get the credit he deserves, and I'll be the first person to admit that. He is a guy that a lot of people thought would fall off after Calvin Johnson was gone, and he didn't. If you were to blindly look at Matt Stafford's numbers, he's a Hall of Famer. Now, there's a lot of numbers Matt Stafford has where, if anybody has ever had him or played against him in fantasy has seen, he shows up in the fourth quarter. Usually when the Lions are down by 21 points, but he shows up in the fourth quarter and gets a lot of those numbers then. Last year he looked decent though. He looked good. He looked like he was kind of falling into that offense and figuring it out in the second year. Got injured, broke his back, and that was the end of Matt Stafford last year. Now, this year, again, it'll be interesting. It'll also be interesting because I don't think Matt Patricia keeps his job very long. Granted, it's just her daughter, but a new owner in Detroit, and I think they might change it up a little bit. So, I have Matt Stafford at 16. It could be higher. He's another one that's a Hall of Fame quarterback, but coming off of an injury, it kind of scares me a little bit. Number 15, and a guy who is under a ton of pressure this year, Baker Mayfield. Oh, how it has turned. Baker Mayfield, after his rookie year, a lot of people were like, oh, he's a top 6 quarterback in the NFL. He's not a top 6 quarterback in the NFL. So, here's the issue. Baker Mayfield last year, 59.4% completion percentage. Yikes. 3,827 yards, 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. Oh, I had a mistake. I'm sorry, Philip Rivers. You were third in the league with interceptions. Baker Mayfield was second, and he had a 78.8 rating. Big yikes. So, phone's gone off. So, was it Freddie Kitchens? That's going to be the biggest question. Was it all Freddie Kitchens? Was Freddie Kitchens really the biggest issue of the Cleveland Browns? The Browns brought in Kevin Stefanski, who they should have hired anyway. It didn't matter. They interviewed him the year before, didn't hire him, and then just hired him now. You bring in Stefanski. He worked wonders with Kirk Cousins. You're hoping he can do the same with Baker. Baker was under a ton of pressure last year. They ran a lot of long developing plays with one of the worst offensive lines in football, which is just brutal to watch. Does Baker get it back? I hope so. I like Baker Mayfield. The other thing I'm really happy to see with Baker Mayfield is he was another guy that kind of seemed to find himself in a lot of unnecessary drama. He's the chip on his shoulder type guy, but don't always make one. Like last offseason, I remember him getting into it with Sam Ehlinger, the quarterback of Texas, because of Oklahoma-Texas rivalry, and it went back to high school. And it's like, dude, you're in the NFL now. He's a college quarterback. Pick and choose your battles, dude. Shut up. Like, there's no reason for that to be an argument you're going to have. So, I do think Baker is going to progress. I think I think it's Stefanski's offense. He's going to do well. His numbers will kind of bounce back out again, but that's where he is at 15. Number 14 is Ryan Tannehill of the Titans. Ryan Tannehill, 70.3% completion percentage, 2,742 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 117.5 rating. To be fair, Ryan Tannehill did not throw the ball down the field much. A lot of this was 6-yard passes, and guys would work with him. Here's the thing about Ryan Tannehill, which is really interesting. If you were to go back and look at Ryan Tannehill as a starter, in Miami, the team was average. He put up good numbers. If you go back and look at his numbers, he's never been a guy that's been a bad quarterback, just not a winning quarterback. They're two wildly different things. I think he fits well with the Titans offense as well. In Miami, he was needed to dominate the game. He was absolutely needed to just run all over and dominate the game. However, for the Titans, sorry, there's a lot of noise above me. It's distracting me. For the Titans, he doesn't have to be. He's a guy, just turn over, hand the ball to Derrick Henry, and rely on your defense, which is a great thing for Tannehill because he can have the 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He can scramble for 7 yards carry, and he can do what the Titans need him to do. The issue the Titans will have is similar to that what the Chargers might have or what the Panthers will have with Phillip Rivers. or with Jesus, Teddy Bridgewater. What happens when the team starts scoring? It's what the Titans ran into the issue with the Chiefs last year. So we'll see. It'll be an interesting concept, but Ryan Tannehill's at 14. I also don't believe he should have been on the NFL's top 100 list, but that's just me. Number 13 is Josh Allen. Josh Allen, also Lamar Jackson light, because let's be honest, he is Lamar Jackson light. 58.8% completion percentage, that's a problem. 3,089 yards, 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He also added 510 yards rushing and 9 touchdowns. Josh Allen progressed greatly in his second year. His first year, he had 10 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. He had similar rushing numbers, but 10 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Problem is he had like a 55% completion percentage. This year, 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 58% completion percentage. Josh Allen needs to become more accurate. You still see him sometimes really relying on that just cannon of an arm, who arguably, other than Mahomes, might have the strongest arm in football. He relies on it too much. Sometimes you don't need all that to make the easy throws. He does get a very good receiver in Stephon Diggs that he can just have run under a ball. And John Brown is no longer his number one wide receiver. But Josh Allen, I think, is a guy who needs to be, keyword Josh Allen, consistency. He has to be consistent with the ball. You'll see him in some games where he looks really good early or really good for a stretch and then kind of falls off. He needs to find consistency. He needs to be able to be that guy that when his team needs him to drive and get a first down, he does it. You go back to the playoff loss against the Texans, it certainly was not. Their last drive, he went backwards. He was taking sacks when they were already in field goal range. It was a terrible issue. He's one of those guys that I think relies too much on his athleticism when it's just, dude, just throw the ball away. You'll be fine. Number 12, Jimmy G of the 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo, 69% completion percentage, 3,978 yards, 27 touchdowns, 13 picks, and a 102 rating. Jimmy G is the epitome of a game manager. I mean, truly is the epitome of a game manager. I've never seen a guy, first off, Garoppolo is another guy who a lot of people were looking at as almost like a Jared Goff. Is he just on a team that works with him and the guys around him, or does he win games for them? And they didn't do him any favors when they're winning NFC titles where Jimmy Garoppolo threw the ball 7 times. Which, don't get me wrong, if it's not broke, don't fix it, but that doesn't help him. The other issue is in the Super Bowl where he looked good early against that weak Chiefs defense. All of a sudden, later in the game, he was missing wide open. He was missing a wide open George Kittle multiple times in that game. And that's not good. That should be your number one target, and you're missing him, which is a problem. There's also at the point where the 49ers were still in that game. I know they lost by 11, but it was only, I believe, a 4-point game at that time, late in the game. And Garoppolo, I don't know who he had streaking down the field. It might have been Emmanuel Sanders. I think it was Emmanuel Sanders. Has Emmanuel Sanders streaking down the field and overthrow him. He had him wide open. It was a walk-in touchdown to take the lead in the Super Bowl. He overthrew him. You're paying him over $100 million. You're paying a quarterback over $100 million. He has to make that throw. You're in the Super Bowl. You need to make that throw. So, I don't think Garoppolo is a bad quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but 12 is about right for him. He's an average quarterback. He's another one I don't think will lose you a lot of games unless you need him to win you the game, and then he's just not worth it. Number 11, Drew Brees of the Saints. Drew Brees last year, 74.3% completion percentage, so you never see him miss a pass. 2,979 yards, 27 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He also doesn't turn the ball over. Drew Brees is just old. The thing with Drew Brees is he doesn't have the arm that he used to. If you watch him actually play, a lot of it, and that's, I know Michael Thomas cries about it, but a lot of the Saints' offenses is short offenses. That's why Teddy Bridgewater succeeded in that offense. It's short passes, it's kind of check downs and screen passes. They don't really blow the top off the defense like he used to do, but it works. I do believe that this is Drew Brees' last season. He's an absolute first ballot Hall of Famer. I think he owns every passing record imaginable. So I'd put Drew Brees at 11. I don't think he is what he used to be, but he doesn't turn the ball over. He really doesn't miss passes. The offense works for him. The issue the Saints have now is teams have started to figure that out, and it's that bend don't break defense of we'll allow you to get the 4-yard pass. We don't really care. It's what the Vikings did against them in the playoffs that beat them. But Drew Brees is 11. Breaking into the top 10, I'll give the Cowboys a top 10 quarterback. Dak Prescott is number 10. Dak Prescott last year, 65.1% completion percentage, 4,902 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and a 99.7 rating. Great statistical year. Lost when it mattered, which is a big knock on Dak Prescott, is when they actually needed a win, he couldn't show up. And the other issue I do have is if you go back and watch Dak Prescott's season, especially the Bears, the Packers, and the Jets, all three losses where the Cowboys were losing big early and tried to rush. A long stretch of garbage time, except for the Jets. They actually made a push to try to win that game. But a long stretch of garbage time, he put up tons of numbers, especially that Packers and the Bears game. I remember the Bears game, people mocking him for how bad he was through 3 quarters. And in the 4th quarter, they weren't going to win that game by any means at all. But his stats at the end of the game, it was Dak Prescott had his horrible game, but statistically he looked like he played fine. It was the other guys that were the issue. So Dak Prescott's one of those guys, statistically will put up numbers. I just don't know. He's not there to win you the game. I think Dak's another guy he's an above average quarterback. I'll never say he's a bad quarterback. I know a lot of Eagles fans like to say that Dak Prescott's a terrible quarterback that's just overhyped. I think he's an above average quarterback that is overhyped and overpushed, but he's a good quarterback. There's no doubt about that. But is he a Super Bowl winning quarterback? I don't know. I think that's why the Cowboys haven't signed him yet. I think they're stuck looking at Dak and wondering, will you be the guy that can win us games when needed? And the problem is their last game before the offseason, he didn't. And he was missing throws in that Eagles game, and they lost 17-9. So number 9, as long as he isn't playing on Monday Night Football, Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings. 69.1% completion percentage, 3,603 yards, 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a 107.4 rating. Kirk Cousins excelled under Kevin Stefanski. There's no other way to put it. He had weapons all over. He excelled under Kevin Stefanski. His issue is always going to be he just doesn't show up when they need him to. Excuse me. Monday Night Football games, any primetime games. They did win the game against the Saints in the playoffs, which is really good for Kirk Cousins, but he's Kirk Cousins. You know, he's always been a thorn in the side of my Eagles, but he's statistically a very good quarterback. He really doesn't turn the ball over a lot either, unless it's big moments. Big moments, Kirk Cousins crumbles, and that's a problem, and that's an issue, and that's why he's at 9. Because you can't argue that he's talented. There's no doubt in my mind he's talented. The dude's going to get paid forever. He's going to have a career forever. He's going to have a career as a starter forever. But I don't know if he's the guy that's going to win you big games, and I am going to be interested to see how he performs without Kevin Stefanski. You got to remember, Kirk Cousins has had Kyle Shanahan as his coach, as his offensive coordinator at least, as well as Sean McVay as one of his offensive coordinators, and Kevin Stefanski. So that's when he succeeded. When John DeFilippo was his OC, he was struggling. So it'll be interesting to see. Number 8 is another guy I think gets a lot of flack for being on a team that just isn't very good, and that is Matt Ryan of the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan is the only reason the Atlanta Falcons haven't had the number 1 pick in the draft for like 3 years in a row. 66.2% completion percentage, 4,455 yards, 26 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and a 92.1 quarterback rating. One thing I like that the Falcons did, not this past draft, but the one before it, was they built an offensive line for him. Now, they were young, but they built him an offensive line. He's got weapons. That offense is not a question. They did give him Steve Sarkisian, who's a drunk, but they got him an offense. Obviously, Sarkisian's no longer the offensive coordinator. I believe it's Dirk Cutter, the former coach of the Buccaneers. I believe is now the offensive coordinator for the Falcons. Their issue's always been defense. And people kind of forget about Matt Ryan and where he is. He had a lot more interceptions last year than I think even he would have liked. He's not usually a guy that turns the ball over much. He's also not a guy who's seen as an athlete. But the Falcons were a team that turned it around in the second part of last year. It's why Dan Quinn kept his job. And Matt Ryan was a big part of that. He can lead that offense. He's kind of older now, but he's not shown signs of regression. He's just stayed consistently where he is, other than a couple more interceptions this past year. But I would put Matt Ryan at number 8. Number 7 is number 1 overall is Tom Brady. Number 1 quarterback of all time, but he's number 7 on this list. 60.8% completion percentage, 4,057 yards, 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and an 88 for a quarterback rating. I think Tom Brady is going to have one of his best statistical years of his career this year in Tampa Bay. Not only does he have the weapons he has never had. He had Randy Moss for 2 years and put up ungodly numbers. But not only does he have weapons in Chris Godwin, in Mike Evans, and O.J. Howard, and in Gronk, he is a quarterback guru of a head coach who's just going to let Brady do what he wants to do. Here's my offense, learn my offense, which I think he will, and go perform. The perfect example is, look, if Jameis Winston can put up numbers where Jameis Winston's like, you take away the interceptions, I'm balling. Well, sorry, Jameis, we can't take away the interceptions. But Jameis Winston's putting up insane numbers under, I believe he had like 5,000 something yards and 33 touchdowns. Just the 30 interceptions that killed him. I don't think Brady's going to be a guy that's going to throw a ton of interceptions this year, because he never has been a guy that's thrown a ton of interceptions. I think he's going to learn that offense. He's going to work well in that offense. The only issue with Brady is Father Time's undefeated, and you almost have to be nervous that eventually one of these times when a 42, 43-year-old quarterback gets hit, he doesn't get back up and just keep throwing the ball. But in terms of pure talent, he still has somewhat of an arm. He's still a great decision maker, and he's going to be put in an offense that allows him to make decisions. I think Brady's going to succeed in Tampa Bay. Number 6, Deshaun Watson. I know a lot of people like to put Deshaun Watson as a top 5 quarterback. I have him as number 6, and there's a reason for this. Deshaun Watson's a hell of an athlete. Okay, he had 7 rushing touchdowns last year to go along with his 67.3% completion percentage, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and 3,852 yards. My issue with Deshaun Watson is this. There's a lot of times where if you watch the Houston Texans, he misses, and bad. He'll have an open receiver, Donovan McNabb's it and throws it in his feet. And it's like, he's another guy that sometimes, also, there's something to be said that he's also running for his life a lot too, because that offensive line is terrible. But he does have a good offensive head coach in Bill O'Brien. Terrible general manager, good offensive head coach. What I'm interested to see with Deshaun Watson is how he performs this year without DeAndre Hopkins, where he can kind of just throw it up to him. Similar to that of the Matt Stafford when Calvin Johnson was gone. You used to watch Lions games and Matt Stafford would just wing it to Calvin Johnson because it would work out well for you. Same thing with Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if Watson falls back, but those 26 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, you have to believe that losing DeAndre Hopkins is gonna knock those down. I don't see how you can believe that, Deshaun Watson's gonna progress better without Hopkins, but adds Brandon Cooks. I don't see that. Number 5, this one is where I'm going to catch the most flack. Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens, the reigning MVP. Here's my issue. So Lamar Jackson, 66% completion percentage, 3,127 yards, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a 113.3 rating. He also had 176 carries, 1,206 yards. Here's my issue with Lamar Jackson. In his first year, when they played the Chargers in the playoffs, in his second year, when he played the Titans in the playoffs, you saw almost immediately teams that force him to just pass the ball, even though his passing stats look great, teams that force him to just strictly pass the ball, he's not great with. He struggles, quite frankly. He really does struggle. My other issue with Lamar Jackson is this, and I really hope Baltimore figures it out. Now that teams saw Greg Roman's offense for Lamar for a year, now they're going to adjust. In his 2 years as a starter, so that's a year and a half, he has 323 carries in a year and a half as a starter. That's insane. For a quarterback, that's way too much. This is another guy that's going to get hit one time, and that's going to be it for him. He's going to be another guy that's going to look like Cam Newton, where he's a good quarterback, but an exceptional athlete that helps him be a good quarterback. And the moment he gets injured, Lamar Jackson is never, I don't care if you're the biggest Lamar Jackson fan in the world, you're never going to tell me that he can drop back, stand in the pocket, and just do work. There's just no way. And I'm not saying you just take him out from running the ball. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But you just drafted J.K. Dobbins. You have Mark Ingram. Actually just run the ball more. The problem is they do the zone read option where Lamar can just decide to keep it himself. And at what point did the Ravens decide, okay, we have to save Lamar from Lamar? So it'll be interesting. But Lamar Jackson at number 5, I think if he puts up another year like he did last year, I would absolutely change it. But he also has to get rid of his playoff demons. Number 4, Carson Wentz of the Philadelphia Eagles. And I know I'm an Eagles homer, but Carson Wentz is a top 5 quarterback. Stop it. 63.9% completion percentage, 4,039 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 93.1 rating, all without having a wide receiver catch over 500 yards. Is there any more I need to say about Carson Wentz? Carson Wentz is a guy who he had that MVP-like season in his first year, or in his second year. By the way, Carson Wentz does need to knock the fumbles off. He fumbles the ball way too much. 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Then he came back after that year, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and got injured again. Then last year as a full-time starter, people kind of looked at it because the Eagles struggled and their offense stalled at times because he had no weapons. But then you actually look at what Carson was working with and the numbers he put up. He put up numbers that were consistent with other top quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, his numbers are right up there with the next 3 guys that I'm about to name. They're right there. Other than the fumbles, he does not throw a lot of interceptions, although people tend to think he's a wild gunslinger. And he's insanely accurate and has a massive arm and can throw on the run. So it'll be interesting. Again, this year you look at Carson Wentz and the Eagles, and they decided to build a team on speed. They're still relying on older veterans that are injury prone, to say the least. So it'll be a big deal if Carson Wentz can. I'd like to see him again knock the fumbles off, but give me a 4,500 yards, 30 touchdown season. It also helps that he is Miles Sanders, who looks like a budding young star at running back. Number 3, discount double check Aaron Rodgers. 62% completion percentage, 4,002 yards, 26 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a 95.4 quarterback rating, and an offense and a head coach that doesn't want him. It's weird. Rodgers is still Rodgers. I don't care what anybody says. He's still Aaron Rodgers. He's still one of the top quarterbacks in the league. He still gets out of the pocket and you cringe because you know he's about to just rip a dime to somebody. Looking at it, I believe Rodgers will stay up there. It would have been nice to see them get him weapons if I was a Packers fan. Go follow Tom Grossi on here, and he'll tell you exactly how much about Aaron Rodgers needs weapons. The dude had his own tryout video. So, but Aaron Rodgers, I have number 3. I think it's kind of self-explanatory, though. Still breaks down defense as well. Still has a big arm. He dumped Danica Patrick because apparently Aaron Rodgers does better every time he breaks up with somebody. Aaron Rodgers is number 3. Number 2, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson for Seattle, 66.1% completion percentage, 4,110 yards, 31 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a 106.3 completion percentage, or 106.3 rating. While doing this list, I actually debated putting Russell Wilson number 1. And there's a reason for that. Is Seattle statistically is one of the worst teams in the NFL. Their rating across the board on Pro Football Focus for their starters in each position is not good. Now, granted, they found a gem in DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett's a really good receiver. Their running backs are Their O-line has been terrible since he's been there. Their defense is sketchy. Now they have Jamal Adams, but their defense is still sketchy. Russell Wilson is the reason Seattle's been good for this long. Russell Wilson is the reason Pete Carroll still has a job. They have not drafted well. Their free agent moves kind of don't make sense. Their trades really don't make sense. They got Jadeveon Clowney, but then let him walk. But Russell Wilson is the constant there. He's another guy, though, that really makes me nervous because he's another guy that's getting older, and he relies a lot on moving, and his escapability out of the pocket is a problem. He's not a huge guy. He's a stocky guy, but he's a shorter guy. He's in his 30s now. He's another one. Does one hit end it all for Russell Wilson? In my standings video, I said Seattle will come in 3rd because I believe Russell Wilson is going to get an injury this year, and it's going to just destroy Seattle. I think if you put, again, I don't think, it might be Geno Smith might be Seattle's backup, but if you put him out there, they're going to be terrible, and it's going to be bad. So Russell Wilson, I'll admit I was wrong on too. Early in his career, I swore he was just a game manager. He proved me wrong tenfold, but I would have him at number 2. And then number 1, I think it's an obvious one. It's Pat Mahomes. 65.9% completion percentage, 4,031 yards, 26 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He had a 105.3 rating, and he missed a few games due to dislocating his knee. He's the strongest arm. He's not devastatingly accurate, but he's got the weapons to make up for it. Sometimes you watch him and it makes you nervous because he throws across the field all the time like Brett Favre, but for some reason his interception numbers don't go up, so you can't argue with it. He won a Super Bowl. Pat Mahomes is the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. So, there's my 32 quarterbacks. Those are also my views on Earl Thomas and my views on the NHL second round playoffs. That's it for episode 4. As always, I'm your host, Frank Wible. This is the Sports Degenerates Show. Please, if you liked what you heard, like, comment, subscribe. And hey, if you want to follow my Instagram, I give out betting odds. I also covered like the Earl Thomas thing. I covered that on my Instagram yesterday before I even wrote the show today. So, thanks for stopping by. I hope everybody enjoyed what they watched, and I'll see you in the next episode.